Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Welcome to Dharma for Kids. My name is Lisa, and I'm going to tell you a story that's very similar to a story the Buddha told over 2,000 years ago. So before we start, think about what are some of your very favorite things. And now, before we start the story, let's relax, take a deep breath, and sit up tall. And then breathe out and relax your shoulders. And now we're ready to start our story. This is the story of the fish and his friend. A long, long time ago, there was once a man who was an advisor to a great king. And this advisor had a very special skill. He could understand what animals were thinking, and he could speak to them in a way that they would understand him. Early one day on the bank of a river, some fishermen came out with their nets to catch fish for their families to eat and to sell at the market for people to buy. Later that day, the advisor went down to the river in a small boat, slowly paddling along and looking deep into the river water. He could see some fish swimming around. Deep in the clear water of the river, one fish looked very beautiful, very colorful. It was shiny bright blue and had purple all down his sides. This fish was surrounded by several other fish who followed wherever he swam. Right behind him was a fish with many dark spots. Everywhere the beautiful fish swam, the spotted fish followed right behind. His eyes were always looking at the beautiful fish. When the beautiful fish swam close to the surface and flipped his body around in the air to dive back down, the spotted fish did exactly the same thing. The spotted fish was watching the beautiful fish so much that he didn't pay attention to anything else around him. The spotted fish was fascinated with his friend, the beautiful fish, who also knew so many interesting things. The beautiful fish knew where to find the most delicious tiny fish and plants to eat. He knew where there were different types of interesting fish to watch. He showed the other fish some shallow areas of the river where the frog eggs would hatch into little tadpoles. And he showed his friends where the tadpoles went when they developed legs and began to jump out of the river onto the land. So the spotted fish thought it was great fun to be with the beautiful fish. He didn't want to pay attention to the advice of his older relatives. They told him it was risky to go to the shallow water, where the eagles would swoop down and grab fish out of the water with their beaks, and where bears would catch fish with their big, powerful paws. On the shore of the river, one of the fishermen cast his net deep into the river. Under the water, the beautiful fish swam up toward the net, brave and curious about what it was. The spotted fish was right behind him. The beautiful fish smelled the net, and it smelled strange, not like something that naturally is in the river, so he suddenly swam away from it. The spotted fish was right next to the beautiful fish, but he was only interested in watching his friend the beautiful fish and wondering where they would go together later. He was thinking that maybe they would go and see the tadpoles. He was thinking so much about what they would do later that he didn't notice the danger of the net, and he didn't swim away as fast as the beautiful fish did. He felt the net rub against his scales, and he realized he was trapped in the net. The fishermen saw that they caught many fish in their net, so they pulled it out of the water and onto the shore of the river. Then they went to gather firewood to make a fire on which to roast the fish. The spotted fish was in the net on the shore of the river with no water to breathe through his gills. His mouth open and closed, trying to pull in water that he needed to survive. He desperately flopped around until finally he got his body out of the net. And then he tried to flop himself back into the river. He flopped and flopped and flopped, but he couldn't get back into the water. He was in agony. The king's advisor walked over to where the spotted fish was wriggling and gasping for water. He understood that the fish was communicating. He was saying, "My friend! Oh, where did my friend go? Where is he? I need to find him. The advisor thought, this fish is so unhappy because he's so crazy about his friend. He is so blindly attached to having fun with his friend. If he dies here with his agony and desire to find his friend, then he will suffer in his next life, and he may even be born in a hell world. So I must save him. The advisor walked up to one of the fishermen and said, Hey friend, you've never given the king a special fish. Today will you give us a special fish? The fisherman replied, Certainly, please take any ones you want. The advisor picked up the spotted fish in his hands and said, This one looks delicious. Then he walked away from the fisherman and looked down in the poor suffering fish's eyes and said, You are so foolish! If I didn't see you, you would have been killed. Your blind desire to be with your friend is making you suffer so much. Don't get trapped by your own desires. The advisor tenderly put the spotted fish back into the river when the fishermen weren't looking. The fish realized how fortunate he was and that the good man saved him. He thankfully pumped the fresh, cool water through his gills and swam deep into the river, happy to be alive. And that's the end of our story. So now I want to ask you some questions. Why did the spotted fish like the beautiful fish so much? Because he knew many things, right? And what happened when they got near the net? The beautiful fish was curious, but then swam away. But the spotted fish, he was just paying attention to the beautiful fish, and he didn't realize the danger, so he got trapped in the net, right? What was he thinking about when he was caught? He was thinking about where they might go later. Maybe they'd go see the tadpoles, remember? And why did the advisor ask the fisherman for a fish? Because he was trying to save the fish without the fisherman knowing what he was doing. And what would happen if the spotted fish would die in agony and desire to be with his friend? He would suffer in his next life, right? And maybe even go to a hell world. So now let's hear what the Buddha taught. He said, obsessed by craving, people run around like a trapped rabbit. Stuck to their attachments, they come to suffering again and again for a long time. So what does the Buddha mean by attachments, being stuck to their attachments? There are people and things and even places that we're attached to, that we like very much, that we want to keep, we don't want to lose, our favorite things. Like the spotted fish in the story was very attached to his friend, the beautiful fish. So let's get back to that question we had before the story. What are your favorite things? Do you have something that you like very much? Of course. Is there some activity that you really like to do, a best friend that you have, a pet, a favorite store, a favorite sport, a special toy, maybe a special blanket, an electronic game, or some special shoes? These are your attachments, the things that you really like. But of course, it's normal to be attached to our things, the things that we like, and the people that we love. It's important to have a loving family and nice friends and activities and sports. But the story teaches us not to be too attached. And what do we mean by too attached? It means not to cling too much, not to be too stuck to something we like, not to be too dependent on someone or too obsessed with something, not to be addicted to something that we like, or not to be too clingy to a particular friend. So what happens if we have too much attachment? Like the spotted fish who was so focused on the beautiful fish that what happened to his common sense when he got near the net? He didn't have much common sense. He was careless. He didn't notice the net. He just didn't notice anything except his friend, as if he was blind and couldn't even see the dangerous net. So that's what the advisor meant by a blind desire. That means liking it so much that we're blind to the other important things around us. So we learn from the story that being too attached can lead to carelessness and danger. But could that happen to you? Well, let's see. When you were having a great time with a friend sometime, have you ever forgotten something you were supposed to do? Or has your favorite game ever made you careless about doing your homework? Or were you ever so anxious to go somewhere special that you forgot about something else? Have you ever grabbed something that you really like and you accidentally push somebody out of the way to get it? Have you ever been so busy doing something that you like that you ignored someone else and hurt their feelings because you weren't paying attention to them? Or have you ever talked about something that you really like and you didn't even notice how others felt about it and they were bored and they said something maybe like, "Why do you always talk about that?" So that's one problem with being too attached. We get careless about other important things. But another problem is that we get upset when we're away from the things that we're too attached to. Like the spotted fish who loved to be around the beautiful fish, and he was so upset when the beautiful fish was away from him. And same for us. When we're too attached to something, we get upset or angry or irritable or anyway, just uncomfortable when we're away from it. When we lose it or when it breaks or when we have to be away from it, then we're really unhappy. So, like the Buddha says, we suffer. We're trapped by our desire. We just can't forget about the thing that we like so much. It just hurts so much to lose it or even to worry about losing it. So how can we help? How can we avoid that hurt? How can we avoid that carelessness from being too attached? First, we should notice the things that we're most attached to. What are our favorite things? Then we should remember that they're impermanent. They're temporary. They won't be with us forever. Why is that? It's because everything changes. One day we won't have it anymore, or it'll break, or it'll get damaged, or somehow we won't be able to enjoy it anymore. So what will happen to our toys, for example? We might outgrow them. We might not love them so much anymore in the future. And what will happen to our friends? Well, a friend may be gone one day. They may move away, or, well, maybe you'll just find another best friend. So what will happen to our favorite activities and places? In some way, at some time, we'll have to let them go. And anyway, as we get older, we change. Other things become more important. There'll be other people to be friends with. So if we remember that everything is impermanent, it can't be with us forever, we have to let it go sometime, then we won't be so upset if we can't have it anymore. So just remember not to be too attached to something that we're careless about other important things. So thank you for joining me, and now let's wish that all beings in all the worlds be happy and peaceful.